Welcome to Just You Watch Me Fix It. This is part 3 of replacing our front door. In previous parts 1 and 2, I removed the really ugly old door and its door frame, and particularly the door sill that you had to step over all the time. Removed all that, installed a nice new door frame, new door, and refitted the weatherboards around about. And yeah, that really has improved the look of it so far. But this is a project that's not quite finished yet, and I'll take you inside and show you what we did on the inside as well. So previously I fitted some plasterboard around the door, and I hard plastered it and soft plastered. So now in this part 3, so I'm going to be applying the final top coat to the door and to the door frame. Right around the door frame will get its top coat. Enjoy. I've just finished putting the undercoat on the door, which is sitting outside. I'll show you in a minute. And now I'm going to put a top coat, top coat on the doorway. It doesn't need undercoating because it comes pre-primed primer undercoat. So that saves us the job of undercoating it. You'll see there's patches of undercoat, and that's where I've filled the nail holes and sanded them off, and I put an undercoat to seal them so that the top coat looks shiny like the rest. So I just need to remove this part of the door latch. Alright, so let's go and get the paint ready. I've used quite a lot of paint top coat already, so we just need to give it a stir, because most paints will settle out and you'll get a clear liquid in the top. So we just need to give it a good stir, clean off the paddle. Okay, pour it a bit into this little bucket. One thing I make sure I do is I brush off the excess paint on one side of the tin, one side of the container only. I always use that side, and I can just lean the brush against the other side. That way I don't get it on the handle. Okay. So the top coat is going to be pretty easy to paint on. The key with painting, I find, is to just slap the paint on first and then finish it off. So don't fiddle around with it too much. Just get it on, and then feather it out. Just cover the surface. The first coat, don't be too concerned about getting it perfectly right, because the first coat, the colours underneath will bleed through a little bit. So I'm just spreading the paint here, and I'm not being too fussy, just making sure it's covered everywhere. And I'll just do the edge. A little bit more on my brush. Not worried about this edge too much. Architrave is going to cover that. So just what's seen, and then we'll just feather it out. Okay, and the outside the same. The outside's not having architrave around it, so that'll need to go right away around the door frame. But again, don't be too fussy. This is just the first coat. You might need to put 3 coats on if it's not covering very well. So some paints cover really well. They've got a lot more pigment in it than other paints. This is an acrylic. If I was personally, if my own personal preference is, if I was painting a door frame that was open to the weather, then I would tend to use oil-based paints. I just personally feel that they have a better duration, able to better stand up to the weather better. Again, don't fiddle around with it too much, just get it on. And the key is have enough paint on your brush. Spread it. Make sure it's all covered, and then you can feather it off, smooth it off. Okay, so now we've feathered off. Okay, that'll be a little bit lines. Some of the undercoat's showing through, but that doesn't matter. It'll pick up on the next coat of undercoat. So I find painting quite a relaxing job. Sometimes when I'm doing a lot of cutting in, I just zone out, think about other things. Yeah, the key, as I've already said, just plenty of paint on your brush. Don't be stingy with loading up your paintbrush with the paint. Get it on, spread it everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but everywhere you want it to go. And then feather off. And you'll find you will move through the painting job much quicker because you're not fiddling around with it. And you'll get a good job because you just feather it off, finish it. Okay, that's the top done, so I'll work my way down. This whole job will probably take about, I don't know, 15-20 minutes maybe. You'll see by the length of the video at the end. It's quite a overcast, cloudy day today. Good day to be doing this when we're not wanting a high gloss finish. So it doesn't really matter from that point of view. But we had quite inclement weather the last few days. It's been snowing for a couple of days, settled on the ground for a few hours, but melted away once the sun come out. And today, just rain is here, which is good in where we live in southern Tasmania. We need the rain at this time of year to soak down deep into the soil. We haven't really had as much rain as we usually have. Okay, so now get down on my knees like I should have done when I proposed to my wife. I'm eternally grateful that I'm married to her. She's a smart woman, and you'll see some of the things that she's worked out and designed, and I scratch my head wondering how to put them into practice, but they come to fruition and look fantastic. So yeah, she's the designer in between the two of us, and I make it happen. And we nut it out together, working out how to get around various challenges that each little Renault brings. And honestly, if you've got the desire, yeah, just give it a go. This is what I want to produce in all my videos. Show people that they can do it too. And you know, when you do it yourself, what a fantastic feeling that is. When you've finished a project, you know it's done right because you've done it, you've worked out how to do it, and you get a real sense of accomplishment. I'm just going to blow the dust away here. So you don't want to pick up any of the dirt. You just have to go carefully here so I don't go quite to the bottom. You don't want to pick up any dirt that I haven't shifted out the way. The tiles will come up and cover that area. So that's just about this side done. A little bit on the tip of my brush. Finish this side up. Again, spread the paint and come back and finish it off nice. So we're nearly done with this side of the door frame. So I'm coming to the end of this doorway. As I say, just get into the zone, whack on a bit of your favourite music if you like, and just go for it. And when you're finished, you'll look back and think, I did it all myself, what a great job I've done. Pat yourself on the back. Have a cup of tea or a beer or whatever you feel like as a treat once you've got it finished. Do the front inside edge. So here has to have architrave go on. I'm not going to worry too much about the back end of the door frame there because that'll be covered by architrave. So feathering off. Okay, the last little bit here. And before, I've got another doorway to do on the back of the house. I've got to install a doorway there into a mud brick wall actually. And when I do that, I'll show you what's involved in installing a completely new door. So that's a bit, you know. Spreading the paint. And then smoothing off. Don't be too worried about lines at this stage, as long as they're too bad. Yeah, so I purchased MDF timber door frame, and it comes pre-primed, so it saves the bother of putting the primer undercoat on. So this is just straight top coat onto that. Okay, so that is the doorway done. So I've got a tin of undercoat. We had this undercoat tinted slightly off-white, like a tiny bit of grey, so that'll be better for the top coat because we have an off-white top coat. So I'm going to give it a bit of a stir first and then I'll start painting. Important when you're removing lids from tins of paint that have been sitting around for a little while, if they've gathered dust, get rid of all the dust before you remove the lid, as much of it as you can, because you don't want to end up in your paint and then on the wall. So I've already done that. Another little tip is to have your brushes, if you're painting water-based paints, have your brushes soaking in water for about 45 minutes to an hour. If you're going to paint with an oil-based paint, have your brushes soaking in terps, mineral terps, for about half to 3/4 of an hour. And of course, before you actually put the brush in the paint, make sure you get all of the excess water or terps out of the brush. It just gets your bristles absorbing the moisture or the terps prior to putting it in the paint, and they work better. The brush performs better. So I've given it a stir. Didn't need much of a stir, there's not a lot of paint left in this tin. And then clean the stick off. And I always brush off on one side of the tin. I'm a bit fussy. Keep the tin clean. Then if you want to read your sticker on the tin that tells you how much tint has been put in it, you can. Okay. So get my ladder. For this, since there's not much paint left in the tin, I'm going to use the tin as my container rather than pour it into a smaller container. Important to get your ladder in the right place so you feel comfortable. Make sure you've got your drop sheet covering your floor. So this is a fairly straightforward painting job. I don't need to go right up to the edge of the board along the top of the doorway because the architrave will cover that. Put it on, spread it evenly and then smooth it off. And get enough paint on your brush in the beginning. Don't be stingy with it. See, a lot of people when they paint, they don't put enough paint on their brush. Load the brush up with enough paint, you'll get to know after a while, and then spread it and then finish it off just with smooth, feather-like brush strokes. So I'm just cutting it around the ceiling. I like to use as big a brush as I possibly can. If you're doing a lot of cutting in and there's enough room, you can still use a big brush. And then feather it off. If you give your brush a little wriggle like that, like trembling, making it tremble, you can work the paint to the tips of the bristles. Just a little trick that makes life easier, especially when you're cutting in, because you need the paint at the tips of the bristles. And by trembling the paintbrush, you can work that paint to right to the tip, and you'll be able to cut in a lot easier. Have a go at that, practice it on a piece of rubbish wood or on a wall that you're going to paint over. Now if you had a big wall to paint, then you would go around and cut in with your brush all around the wall edge and the ceiling and the doorway, and then you'd come back and you'd roller it. But this is just a little wall, it's not worth getting the roller out and having to clean it all up again. We'll just do it with a brush. Always make sure you've got your ladder in a position where you feel comfortable painting. If you need to move it, move it. So I'm going to cut into the corner again, give my brush a little tremble. It's like vibrates the paint to the tips of the bristles, and you get right into the corner nice and neatly. I won't say that again because you'll get sick of listening to me say the same thing over and over again. Every now and then you might get a bristle come out of the brush. Even with high quality brushes, seems to happen every now and then. I don't need to go right to the bottom because I've got skirting board that's going to cover up the wall there. There we go. Nice and easy job. So if you have a look here, I've got 2 benches, 2 blocks of wood, and then a towel, an old towel, over the blocks of wood so that the door sits proud from the bench, and I can paint the top face and the edges because it's up off the bench. So before I do that, I'm going to give it a bit of a sand. So I'm just going to give the door a light sand. Knock off any whiskers. Go around the edges. There we go, that should do. I'm just putting on a gloss white. This has had 2 top coats already, this door. Normally that would be enough, but I was a little bit lazy and used a undercoat that was slightly tinted grey, and so I've had to put another top coat on because that slight tint of grey undercoat was bleeding through the paint. So make sure you don't do that. Just get an undercoat that's white. So just give this a little mix. Nice fine weather today. Good day for painting. Gave the brush a wash, so I've got to get the last little bit of water out of it. Okay. All right. So here we go. Now, important to remember, always paint the bottom of the door. That's really important because that keeps it weatherproof, stops any moisture from soaking up into the timber, and yeah, it's much better for the door. It'll last a lot longer. Done. So once you put your paint on, finish it off nicely, and then give it a little feather off along the corners so there's no drip underneath. So you can see, because the door's lifted up on those two supports, it allows me to easily paint along the edge without the bench being in the way. This is an easy coat to paint on because it's already got two top coats on. So it shouldn't take too long. It shouldn't take too long to dry either before I can turn the door around and do the other side. So put it on, feather it off, smooth it off nicely, and then finish off by running along the corners to make sure there's no drips. Now next I'm going to do the inside. I can quite freely paint along the inside edge up against the glass because this is a new door and it comes with a veneer of plastic attached to the glass, so it makes it easy to paint. If you don't have that, then you've got to mask it up, of course. Don't need to load your brush up with too much paint when you're doing the edges, just enough. Okay, so that's that done. Now I'm going to paint the face. It's a relaxing job painting, I find. Don't get too stressed when you paint, just get in the zone. And painting makes a real big improvement to a home, and it's not hard to do. Like a lot of things though, it's the preparation that takes the time. Make sure there's no build-up of paint along the edge. There we are, we have the door done. To prepare the door frame to be painted, I just need to mask up around the tiling that I've done. So I'm going to cut some masking tape and just cut it square with the scissors, because that'll sit in the corner nicely. Do that again for this side. And then one for the front. A bit for this side. And there we have it, that's ready to paint now. I'll do the same for the other side. So now I'm about to paint the door frame. So later on, I will mask off the white frame, door frame, and then paint the weatherboards the grey colour. For now, I'm not going to worry about that. Work your corners first. Get the paint in there, both sides. Always the finish coat, the final coat is pretty easy to do because you're not having to soak into the timber on like an undercoat, and it's mostly covered. It just needs a third coat in this case, just to stop that undercoat from bleeding through. So I've flipped the door over and I've just got to paint this face edge now. And before I do that, just give it a light sand, just to knock off any whiskers, little bits that have got stuck there. There we go. And the inside looks pretty good. So just brush if there is any dust, just give it a light run over with a rag. And away we go, the last coat. Just do the beading around the glass first. As I say, you don't need to be too particular with the last coat, especially on a third coat. As I say before, this door is a new door. It comes with a plastic laminated to the glass, so you can just paint freely. And then after you've finished painting, you cut along where the plastic laminate is up against the beading, cut along there with a knife, a Stanley knife, craft knife, and then peel the plastic off. You've got a nice clean glass pane. All right, so start painting. Don't mess around when you're putting the paint on, just get it on, spread it evenly. Spread it evenly and then smooth it off. And then check the edges for runs or build-up of paint. Use your paintbrush. Use all the bristles. Spread the paint. Oop, if you get a hair out of the brush, get that off. So use your bristles, full bristles. Spread the paint smoothly and then feather it off. And then check the edge for build-up of paint. And that way it's much, much quicker. You've got to have enough paint on your brush too. You don't want a tiny bit of paint on your brush so you're scrubbing it, forcing it everywhere. That's not going to get a good finish. You're not going to put enough paint on then. Yeah, this brush is not impressed with it losing the bristles. As I say, if you are starting out in learning to paint or learning to do some carpentry work, don't be content with cheap tools. Get yourself the proper gear. Because it's hard enough when you're learning. You don't want to have rubbish tools or ones that are not going to do the job properly. There we go. That side's done. Simple. All right, I'll wait for that to dry thoroughly and hopefully get a bit of hardness in it before I have to fit the door again. I'll try and, it's about 3:30 now, I think. So I'll try and hopefully have the door dry enough to be able to rehang it at around 5 o'clock. So I'm going to refasten the hinges to the door now that I've painted it. So it's a heavy door. Get the door in close to the right position. And then what you want to do is put the door on a slight angle so it tips this edge up, this side of the door up slightly high, so you can line the hinge with where the holes are in the door frame. Once you've screwed that one in, don't screw it all the way in, but screw it enough to hold the door. Then you can reposition the bottom of the door with a wedge. So have that ready to go. So that's slightly on an angle like that to tip this up off the floor on this side, and I'm holding it out. I'm just going to start off the screw. I need to move this in a little bit so I've got enough room to drill. The key there is to lift this till it lines up with the hole, and you it's sitting on that corner on an angle. It's just tipping this up to the top. Screw this one in. Okay, that's locked in. Now what we want to do is put a wedge under the door so that the door is now aligned properly, and the hinge, the hole in the hinge, will line up in with the door frame hole. A little bit more. So I've got a hinge holding that door in place. So just to run over the process again, line the door up close to where it's got to go, tip it slightly that way so that the hinge is raised to the point where the hole in the hinge lines up to the hole in the frame. Drill that in, because the weight of the door will be sitting on that corner. And then once you've fastened the top, you can go down the bottom, move the door out, put the wedge in until the hole in the hinge lines up with the hole in the door frame. Okay. Now, before I put any other screws in, just make sure it swings nice and freely. And that's working beautifully. So I can just screw the rest of the screws in and the door will be back on with no issues. Which we weren't expecting any issues because it was already pre-hung. I'll also remove the masking tape from the bottom of the door frame. Now all that remains is to replace the door handle and the bolt. So now all that remains to be done is top coat on the plasterboard wall, paint the architrave before I cut it, and then cut it to fit around the door. And then this doorway will be finished.